Good morning, guys. Not sure what kind of a day it is. One moment it's pretty bright, the other moment it's cloudy. Kind of like the way life is. But I'm going through some verses in Timothy, 2 Timothy chapter 1. And just want to share this little thought. Here it was Paul was talking about, the fact that he's in chains for Christ and preaching the gospel. And then he says something very interesting that I want to kind of expound on. He says, for this reason, I suffer the way I suffer because I'm not ashamed of the gospel, even though I'm suffering for it. I'm still not ashamed, and for that reason, I suffer the way I suffer because I know in whom I believe, and I know that He's able to commit that which I've entrusted to Him until that day. The point I want to make is that He was suffering, but He did not allow it to bring Him down because He says He knew this God that He's believed on a personal and an intimate level. The knowledge of exactly who God is and the way this God does not allow our trust and confidence in Him to go in vain, that is what was able to help him to just keep trusting. That in spite of the fact that here he was imprisoned in chains, he can still keep believing in this God, knowing that this is a God that will come true. This is a God that will keep His word. And so I want to remind us, it is all about getting to ensure that you know Him that much, that close, that it brings a confidence in His word. He says that I'm going to be the head and not the tail. He says that my business will prosper. He says whatever I put my hands to will prosper. He shows me this vision for my life. And so because He said it, and I know who He is, I know that I'm not going to be disappointed. I know, even though when I look around and I don't see things seeming to line up the way it should or as fast as I think they should, I'm going to continue to keep my trust in Him. The thing about it, He said, this is why I suffered the way I do. And I'm thinking, like, how did He suffer? He didn't suffer complaining. He didn't suffer just like, oh my gosh, and then in all a frenzy and a panic. He suffered the kind of almost nonchalant attitude, like, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, I know this God, and I know that what He says is what will prevail, not what you guys think, not what you guys want to do to me, not what, in spite of whatever you do, this gospel, Jesus is still going to be exalted, and what He has designed for this world, for those who love Him, will come to pass. Every promise that He's made will be fulfilled. But and the thing is, He knew, because God told it from the inception when He took on this job, that He was going to suffer for the gospel. And He was willing to do it because of what it meant, knowing that lives are going to be changed, hearts are going to be touched through His ministry. And I think that's why He took that much care in ensuring that He wrote to the churches that He founded to keep them grounded, to ensure that know that, hey, in the end you win. Once you have that intimate relation, that confidence, you know Him, get to know Him that way, in that you can believe everything He says in spite of what you look around and see. Sometimes we look around and our circumstances really don't line up with our gift, really don't line up with the promises that we have for our lives, really don't line up with our goals. But just keep going, just keep trusting, know Him, and above all else, work with that knowledge that you have of who God is. And if you're not sure, get into the Word. Get into the Word and see all those promises. See all those promises fulfilled. Let your faith build up when you think about Abraham, childless, an old man, no hair whatsoever, to the point that he said, hey, I'll take Lot along with me because, if I die, somebody got to inherit all this wealth that God has given to me. But then here came Isaac. Think of so many others that waited. We think of Daniel, we think of Joseph, all those years, even to the point that he was in prison, the lowest, first he was, a servant, and a slave, and then he became, a nice, trusted servant. But then here he's back into a prison. But sooner rather than later, there came the prime minister. So I just want to encourage us to, if we do have to suffer for a while, if we got to wait for a while, let's suffer the way Paul did. Suffer with a confidence of knowing that this too shall pass, knowing that, hey, it's not the end, that there's a purpose for this, that somewhere along in this suffering, somewhere in this wait, there's a lesson for me to learn. And so once I keep getting to know God more intimately and listen to what He is saying about the situation, in the end, I win. We come out at the exact place where He wants us, with the blessings that He has promised us, with the fulfillment of those desires that He has already promised to you. That's my word of encouragement today. Remember, He loves you, and I do too. Be blessed. Have a wonderful day.